Hello, my name's Andrew, and this is Vlog 2, Speed and Agility. For this vlog, I will compare two athletes perform an acceleration and change of direction exercise. Also, I will define a skill and a capacity, perform a task analysis to understand the characteristics of acceleration and change of direction in their chosen sport. I will then suggest reasons for their chosen patterns of movement based on the available information, outline the implications of their movement, and suggest interventions to address their deficiencies and skills capacities. Lastly, I will summarize my findings. For the purpose of this vlog, I'll define a skill as a coordinated execution of the body to achieve a desired outcome, usually in a given amount of time. A defining characteristic of a skill is that its execution is often improved in the short term with sufficient coaching, but may take years to develop. In contrast, I have defined a capacity as the unique characteristics of anatomy and physiology that moderate the movement. These characteristics may have limited capacity to change over the weeks or months. A task analysis of acceleration in rugby suggests the average distance covered is 12 meters, with max velocity achieved at 20 to 30 meters. This indicates acceleration is important to rugby. In contrast, successful change of direction typically involves an angle of 20 to 60 degrees, with 1 to 2 body lengths away from the opponent, which both increase the probability of separation. For this vlog, I will be looking at several things I consider important to acceleration and change of direction. For instance, the expression of ground reaction force relative to body mass, or their force velocity profile, the direction of forces, and ground contact time may influence acceleration. Similarly, change of direction can be broken down to three components. The cognitive, technical, and physical aspects of the athlete may influence the efficiency of change of direction. Athlete 1 comes from a background in weightlifting, who has only recently started playing rugby. The main thing to note is a high back squat to body weight ratio, which is higher than the normative value of 1.3 to 1.6. Athlete 1 utilizes a hip dominant strategy for acceleration by stepping back with the front foot, which rotates the center of mass forward to 50 degrees, which is within the normative range according to Wild 2022. The flexion of the hip and knee to 90 degrees, along with the forward center of mass, facilitates the forefoot landing of the second step, that reduces the contact time and improves the horizontal projection of force. However, the athlete fails to maintain a plantar flex foot in the second step, which may allow force to dissipate from the Achilles tendon. The shin is perpendicular to the ground, which decreases the moment arm of the hip flexor, which increases the swing velocity, but there is limited extension to the shoulder, which may increase rotational torque of the trunk, potentially leading to lower back pain. Though the athlete seems technically sound, according to Wild 2022, there is no ideal technical model for acceleration and is highly individual. However, based on 4-5 meter split times, the athlete has an imbalance in their force velocity profile, with a bias to the force end of the curve. As mentioned, the athlete seems to have reasonable technical skill, alongside a ground contact time and a drop jump lower than the average, which suggests other mechanisms of the poor max velocity. This may be explained by the athlete's lack of training history in sports performed at maximal speed, and the inability of the monoarticular muscles to generate higher velocities, which explains the relatively higher split times for 10 to 20 meters, and the max velocity being outside the normative range. Therefore, this athlete could be considered to have a capacity issue in generating velocity. The interventions that I would suggest the athlete perform are drills that achieve max velocity, like flying 10s or 20s. Based on a study by Watkins 2021, the athlete could perform counter movement jumps with an additional 10% body weight, or jump shrugs at 65% 1RM, which have been proven to address the velocity deficit, resulting in a more optimal force velocity profile for achieving greater top end speed in 10 to 20 meters. Furthermore, prescribing these exercises in a traditional block style of sets and reps will help maintain performance in the session and will result in a greater overall stimulus. For left side change of direction, athlete 1 begins the maneuver using one step to decelerate to perform a lateral shuffle, landing at a 50-degree angle in the frontal plane with the center of mass away from the contact foot. This improves the athlete's ability to change direction, but the athlete lands with the foot externally rotated, which may increase injuries in the right ankle. On the second transition step, the athlete lands with their foot in front of the center of mass, which will likely increase braking forces, diminishing their ability to reaccelerate. From the lateral view, the athlete lowers their center of mass for the first transition step, which according to Wheeler 2011, increases the ground contact time, which enhances the stability of the athlete for a potential tackle. However, they land with a heel strike on the second transition step, which will also likely increase braking forces, further diminishing their ability to reaccelerate. Then, using deductive reasoning, I ruled in or out the cognitive, technical, and physical factors that might explain why the athlete is unable to re-accelerate effectively after performing a change of direction. As there was no significant cognitive element, I focused on the technical and physical factors as potential issues. I then assessed the athlete's reactive strength index from a drop jump, which was found to be within the normative range, suggesting a skill issue. To improve the skill, the movement was done at a slower pace over a shorter distance at random angles. Since it was myself performing the skill, I opted to use an internal focus, trying to land on my toes with my centre of mass forward. Upon retest, the athlete achieves a more favourable position to re-accelerate, suggesting a skill deficit. Athlete 2 comes from a background in middle distance running. He's only recently started playing touch rugby. The main thing to note with this athlete is they have no prior history of strength training. Unfortunately, as the athlete tested positive for COVID-19, I was unable to perform some of the assessments that I preferred and had to rely on previous data to inform my interventions. Athlete 2 utilized the knee dominant strategy by stepping forward with the front foot, which is typically thought to be less effective than stepping back for generating horizontal force. This strategy resulted in more upright posture, which resulted in more force directed vertically, decreasing the effectiveness of the initial acceleration. Also, the athlete overstrides with the left leg, evident by the knee angle of 120 degrees. As a result, the foot strikes the ground forward to the center of mass, increasing the braking force, further decreasing the effectiveness of the forward acceleration. As a consequence, this may predispose the athlete to hamstring issues, as the biarticular muscles move through greater range at higher velocities. Potential reasons for the strategy may be due to the athlete needing more ground contact time to generate enough impulse to overcome gravity and propel forward. The other potential reason is that it's a skill issue and the result of only recently beginning a sport that requires acceleration. To assess if it was a capacity issue, I used the athlete's previous ground contact time of a 20 centimeter drop jump, which was timed at 341 milliseconds, which is outside the normative range according to Macalla 2020. However, the athlete was unfamiliar with the test at the time, which may have altered the performance. To assess if it was a potential skill deficit, the athlete was asked to repeat the drill with an external focus to jump back onto the toes to encourage a forward lean. Seemingly, this forward lean also resulted in more forward center of mass to the contact point of the foot, which helps decrease braking forces, but the knee angle remains unchanged, suggesting a greater dependence on the hip. Adopting this strategy results in the athlete covering the 5-meter distance in less time, from 2.4 seconds to 2 seconds, suggesting a potential skill deficit with their technical model. The interventions that I suggest the athlete perform are exercises that encourage a forward lean, like jump back starts that are already demonstrated, falling starts, or block starts. In comparison to athlete's 1 skill deficit, these interventions could be prescribed in a traditional block style to avoid regression to a previous strategy. For less hard change of direction, athlete 2 begins to maneuver by using one step to decelerate, landing at a 60-degree angle in the frontal plane. However, the foot is dorsiflexed in the second transition step, which may increase braking force, diminishing the athlete's ability to re-accelerate. The decreased frontal plane angle and dorsiflexed foot may be the result of the athlete lacking the necessary capacity to generate enough impulse, or a lack of familiarity with the skill. As the skill remained unchanged despite cueing the athlete to stab the ground with the leg, I moved on to assessing for a capacity issue. To test for a capacity issue, I used the athlete's prior reactive strength index that was below the normative range according to Flanagan 2008. Based on these previous values, I considered athlete 2 to have a capacity issue in generating required impulse in enough time to deaccelerate. The interventions I was prescribed to the athlete are single leg press with a high foot to target hip strength and split jumps to develop greater force development. Upon review, I would consider 1 to 2% change in acceleration over 5 to 20 meters clinically significant. In comparison, if the number of separations in a game increased, I would consider it a transfer to sport performance. There have been some limitations with this analysis, and some noteworthy changes that I would implement at a second review. In summary, athlete 1 has a capacity issue in acceleration and is unable to generate the higher velocities reported in the literature. In comparison, they have a skill deficit in change of direction and dorsiflex the foot in the second transition step, which increases braking forces. In contrast, athlete 2 has a skill deficit in acceleration, with a lack of forward lean resulting in more force directed vertically, while in change of direction they have a capacity issue and are unable to generate the necessary impulse to decelerate, resulting in a small frontal plane angle.